So getting ready to walk up this trail and miss you guys. Sometimes we need to go away and have our alone time in order for, the next phase. So, all right, so I'm all bundled up. It's probably 35 degrees out here, so it's kind of cold. Got my gloves on now. So, anyway, I just wanted to talk with y'all about, I guess the topic would be like boundaries and respecting other people within the church. And I just wanted to share my experience on that. So my hair is all up in my hat so that it doesn't fly around in my face. So I still have my long hair. It's just up in the hat. So anyway, so I have a background of being a chef and a health coach, and I've worked in different restaurants in the past, so I know what food temperatures should be and the proper care for making something cold temperature, hot temperature, when you're transporting food, etc. So I have that baseline. I have that baseline already, and so not to say that everyone else has that experience, but I'm just saying I do. So the point is that I went to a church event, and I brought my own potluck item. Now, I'm just giving you again a summary, and hopefully some of all these details will make sense. And of course, everybody wants to reach you when you're trying to record a video. All right, so bottom line is I had created some food for this event, and the food was hot, so I needed to think about this ahead of time. How was I going to prepare the food at my home? How was I going to keep the food heat and transport? How was I going to keep the food the appropriate temperature while at the church? So all of these variables I had considered prior to making that decision on these items. So again, as a chef, I have a lot of gear. I have a lot of kitchen equipment and supplies and mobile equipment for transporting items. And of course, it's on Shabbat, so you're supposed to have your items prepared and that you're just rewarming them up. And the whole point is this is the concept, okay? This is the concept of what I was attempting to do. So I had baked these hash browns in the oven. I had air fried mozzarella sticks in an air fryer, and I knew that I was gonna serve those items hot. And then I had a tabbouleh, which is barley grains with vegetables as a cold dish. So obviously I know how to take care of the cold. I'm going to refrigerate it, or in transport I'm going to put it on ice or keep it in a refrigerator. And as far as the hot foods, I had baked and air fried the items as their original cooking or original baking, and then after that I had planned that I was going to use a food warmer with a glass jar on top of the food warmer to, quote, serve the food so that the food would be served hot. Now, I did get to the event with enough time to set up properly so that my food was on the table and my food was hot, and that I had the right utensils to scoop the food out of the dish. So what I'm saying is I was prepared. I was prepared with the items to hold my food. I was prepared with the food warmers to keep my food at the correct hot temperature, and I was monitoring it up until the point that I put it on the table. Then the church service was approximately an hour. And after the church service, I went to again check on my food. And when I went to check on my food for this potluck, what I found was that someone, I don't know who, someone had put my food, they had removed my glass dish that had my food in it. They had put my food on paper plates, and they had put my food on paper plates on top of a food warmer. And at this point, the food warmer, and again, I don't know at what point it was unplugged, so it was not hot. So somebody put paper plates of my items, removed my glass dish, unplugged my food warmer, so now all of my food is not hot as it should have been at that point, but it is cold, okay? So I'm a little frustrated, so I go into the kitchen trying to find out what's going on, and what I find is that someone else has confiscated, borrowed, stolen my glass jar without asking, without having a conversation, and clearly my food was labeled with my name on it, and somebody did not care to ask. So they were in the midst of pouring chili from a plastic container into my glass container. So as I said, I was a little frustrated because my food was left cold on the table, and I was trying to figure out who was in charge of doing this thing. So when I asked the question, people were like, oh, well, this is just what we do. And I said, no. I said, you don't take somebody else's food that's hot and prepared and leave it on the table to be cold so that you can take someone else's dish away so that you can make your food hot in someone else's dish when you were unprepared. No, that's like the story of the 10 virgins. So let's talk about the story of the 10 virgins. The story of the 10 virgins is that there's 10 virgins, and they all have their oil and their candles lit, and they're prepared for the Messiah. They are prepared that they have the ingredients to sustain their candles so that they are preparing the way for the Messiah. Well, the problem is there are another 10 virgins that come to the other 10 virgins and they say, give us your oil. And the original 10 virgins say, no, go get your own oil, for we don't want to miss the Messiah. So the point is, the 10 second virgins, as they go to buy their oil, they miss the Messiah. They are locked out. So the point is, this story I was using as an illustration. I said, no. I said, I'm the person who was prepared. I'm the one that had my food at the correct temperature. If you asked me if you could use my dish, or you asked me if I had something else to help you with the fact that someone else did not have their proper dish, then that would have been different. I said, but the problem is I was not asked. It was, quote, borrowed, taken, stolen without a conversation. Now, so the person said, well, now the husband steps in and he says, what's going on? Now, I appreciated that the husband was now trying to be the leader, trying to resolve the situation, because now 2 women are taking my dish. I'm advocating and standing for the fact that I was prepared. Somebody else was not. No one had the decency to ask me about needing assistance or to use my dish. So I said, no. I said, here's the bottom line. If someone would have asked me, I said, I have a camper van outside and I could have gladly given a crock pot or another dish that could have helped this person who doesn't have their chili. And I said, but the issue is, I was not asked. You just took what wasn't yours. You left my food to be not prepared for, when it was prepared. And that's not being godlike either. So I said, no, put it back. So now the person who has dumped the chili in my plate is now washing the plate so that she can return the plate back to me so that I can put my food and set my food up properly on the warmer. So the other young girl decides to go out and turn on the burner where the paper plates are sitting on top of a hot burner that has the hash browns and the mozzarella sticks sitting on paper plates. And so the whole point is, now the person is going to cause a fire because they are not conscious enough to know how to even cook and use a food warmer properly. So now I go back into the kitchen a second time and I said, who just turned on the hot warmer with my items in paper plates that still have not, where's the glass bowl? And the person's like, well, I thought you wanted them heated up. And I said, if you put paper on a hot surface, it's going to burn and catch on fire. I'm like, didn't anybody teach you about cooking properly? Now, at this point, everybody thinks I'm the jerk, okay? So I said, if you said you're gonna do it, then please make the exchange, do it correctly, so that my food will be in the condition that it needs to be hot for the potluck. So then all of a sudden, my dish is back on the tray, the food is in the tray, and wouldn't you know that when everybody came around to choose food, everybody chose what I had put in the tray and everything went. And I had compliments from people saying, oh, those hash browns were delicious and those mozzarella sticks were delicious. Now, I'm not seeking approval. That's not what this is about. My point is about boundaries. It's about respect. It's about asking. Now, the sermon that day was on focusing on the positive, not focusing on the negative. And it was also stressing the 10 Commandments, that we should be honoring and following the 10 Commandments. Now, one of the 10 Commandments is, thou shalt not steal. Now, whether you think that borrowing, using without permission, taking without permission is okay, and maybe other people have done this for other years in this church that way, that's called stealing. That's called coveting. That's not biblically correct either. And it's not, and it wasn't like a huge church. It's a small church. All somebody had to do was raise up the dish and say, excuse me, whose dish is this? I would have heard them and said, oh, it's mine. We could have come to a different conclusion that was win-win. But the point is, this person was creating win-lose with me. They were not accepting responsibility that what they did was wrong. They did not want to repent. They did not want to admit that what they were doing was wrong. They wanted to say that I'm being ungrateful because I'm not sharing, when that's not the case. I had plenty of dishes in my camper van that I could have extended to them had they asked. So my point is boundaries. If I were to let somebody come into my kitchen and just take over my kitchen, and they would destroy it and make a mess and not put things back and leave things in disarray, I would really be thinking twice before I allow that person to come into my home again and be using my kitchen, because it's about respect. Now, if somebody came to my home and it was a potluck and they neglected to bring the correct pot or pan or dish, and they needed something that would help them and assist them to be able to present their dish appropriately, then what they should do is ask the homeowner, ask the hostess, say, excuse me, I need some help, I need a certain dish to help me. Could you help me? Is there something extra? But the point is, to take it, that's like somebody walking into my kitchen, taking what isn't theirs, and then just making an excuse that they took it and just threw my food on the side. Like, your food's not important. It doesn't matter about your food temperature and what you brought and how much care and time you put into making your item. This person who came at the last minute, who's not prepared, who bought something from the store, it's not even homemade, they want to come in front of you and take your dish and make you and your food not eatable. Now, the whole point is, obviously I was annoyed, okay? And in the moment, like I said, I did the best that I could to listen to the two girls who were attempting to make amends, but they really were not apologizing for what they did. Now, the one girl says, "Oh, I'll fix it back." In the meantime, I went to talk to one of my other friends who is someone who is an advocate, and I find that he's level-headed, and I said, "Excuse me, can I borrow you for a moment and tell you what just happened in the kitchen?" And he said, so I recounted what happened, and he's like, "Oh my goodness." He's like, "Yeah, let me go in there and talk with you." At that point, the other woman's husband comes out. So now it's my friend advocating for me, the other woman's husband advocating for her, and he says, "Well, they've replaced it, they've washed the dish, they've put it back, so just drop it." And I said, just like in grief, I said, no one can tell me when I'm done with my grief. No one can tell me how to grieve. No one can tell me how long it's going to take for me to get from point A to point B, because that is God's job working through me. And I said, I appreciate that at this point I removed myself from the situation as to not get more escalated. I reached out for help from someone else to help calm me down. I am talking to you now, and I'm relaying to you the reason why I got upset, because those two women took, and in my mind, stole without asking. This is a church. We should be respectful of one another's belongings, and it's not so huge that somebody could have just held the dish up and said, "Excuse me, whose dish is this?" You know, and then we could have had a win-win solution instead of a win-lose solution. And again, my food should not sacrifice for someone else's food who was ill-prepared to begin with. So they need to bear their consequence of their actions, and I needed to bear the consequence of my preparedness. So then the person said, "Well, I need you to forgive my wife." And I said, "Look, right now the incident just happened this second, and I'm not in a position right now this second to feel that, like I'm over it. I'm not over it right now. It just happened 30 seconds ago. I am standing away. I'm going to calm myself down quietly. And yes, at this moment, I don't want to interact with those two people that didn't even have the courage to say it to my face." I'm like, I'm creating distance for my own sanity. Now, that person was annoyed with me again that I was not able to quickly snap my fingers and be in a place of forgiveness. Now, I think all of us would like to be able to forgive, but given the consequences of different incidences, given the triggering of different things, here's the bottom line. I have just gone through a season where many of my belongings were stolen from my late fiance who died of drug addiction, and many of my assets were stolen from my fiance of drug addiction, and all of my cash that I had saved for many years was stolen. So I'm in a season where I am still dealing with the impact and consequences of that addict in active addiction who was a narcissist, and the impact that he made on my life. And I'm still working through all of those variables of how his behavior impacted my life. So when someone else is in a state that appears to me as if they're, quote, borrowing, taking, stealing something of mine visibly, and I catch them in the act and I call them out on their behavior, which is not appropriate, I have a right to deal with myself and allow God to work through me in however long it takes. It doesn't mean I'm going to snap my fingers and be over it. And I don't think that forgiveness can be demanded from anyone. It sometimes takes time. So eventually, after that husband went away, and I was talking to my friend, and we talked about other topics. And then when I felt ready, I then went back into the room, and at this point the potluck was well underway and people were sitting down and eating. And the point is, I enjoyed the rest of the afternoon. I fellowshiped with other people. I had a really good time. So the point is, I wasn't letting that incident ruin everything, okay? I still was able to move beyond it. And at the same time, I'm using this video to illustrate that people, you know, if you don't have basic etiquette and, you know, skills, just go back to the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet. If somebody else has something and you want it, you don't just take it, you ask. And when you ask for something, God will create a way for things to line up. But when you don't ask and you just take, you're creating strife among other people. Now, if in fact the person had come to me, and let's give the opposite scenario, if they would have lifted up the dish and said, whose dish is this? I would have said, oh, that's my dish. And then they would have said, you know, we have a dilemma. This person didn't bring a bowl and we wanted to use your glass dish. At that moment, I could have offered another alternative solution. I could have said, hey, I can run out to my truck. I've got a crock pot in there. She could put her chili in there. Or I have another dish. It's not glass, but it's, you know, plastic, microwave safe, and you could put her dish in the microwave and then put it in there. And I'm like, but my food was not microwaved. It was made from scratch. And so I didn't want to put my food in the microwave. I never use a microwave. I don't even own a microwave. So what I'm getting at is there could have been a compromise had the person asked. But by taking and not, you know, giving me the opportunity to even say yes or no, that's what agitated me, because I was kept out of the communication loop. I was not respected enough for someone to even ask. Now, if there were like tons and tons of people, we're talking, let's just say thousands of people at an event, and they were like, oh, I don't know, we're just gonna, you know, I'm on the hospitality committee and I'm just gonna make a decision, that would have been different. But we're talking about maybe 20 people in a room. You know, so that's where I'm saying it was so simple for them to have lifted up the dish, said, excuse me, whose dish is this? I would have heard them. We were all standing in the same room in a little galley kitchen connected to that room. So the point is, it was not difficult for someone to ask for help, and they refused to. Now, in this other context, okay, I waited until after this event, and after this event, I came home and I got into my Bible and I looked up different things to figure out, where am I not seeing something? And am I being a jerk in this whole thing? Should I have been more giving? Should I have been more lenient? And the whole point is, my agitation was with the fact that I was disrespected. My agitation was that instead of somebody asking, they took. And in my book, taking without permission is stealing. Taking under the label of borrowing is stealing in my book. It's not, you know, there's no agreement. If there was an agreement that if anybody brings their food and they put it on the table, that anybody on the hospitality committee can do anything to their food, but I never signed that agreement. I never verbally agreed to that. I brought my potluck item. I was managing the hotness of my food, and when I found out that someone else had tampered with it, that's like too many chefs in the kitchen. And the point is, if we were all supposed to, quote, self-manage our items, which I was, when somebody had tampered with my item, I wanted to know who did it, I wanted to know why they did it, and I really wanted to know why they didn't have the decency to ask. That's it. Now, as I got home and I was in the Bible and I started to look up different things about generosity and about even just like sacrificing, you know, the first shall be last and last shall be first. And like I said, I did look into other things to see, am I taking this a little bit out of context, or am I thinking too much about this? But again, I consulted with my besties, and one of my go-to people in regards to hospitality is my own mother. My own mother is a wonderful chef. She's an amazing baker, and I shared the story with her. And her first question was, is it a cultural issue? And I said, what do you mean? She said, were you like at a certain gathering where it's a certain ethnic group of people and perhaps they have a different way of interpreting things than you do? And I said, well, it was a variety of people. It wasn't just one ethnic group. And she said, okay. And then as I explained the details, my mom was like, well, in my book, borrowing, taking without permission is stealing. So then I had my, quote, confirmation that it's not just that I was an irritated person who was disappointed. No, my own mother was in agreement that the situation as it was handled was inappropriate, and that, you know, people should know the basics of food preparation, how to handle something when it's cold, how to handle something when it's hot, and how to be respectful to other people's items at a potluck. You don't just take somebody else's item, claim it as your own to make your food look like you were prepared when you were not prepared, and then put somebody else's food on a paper plate so that it's not hot and it's not desirable looking in the form that it was put in, so that someone else can pretend and be a poser that they were prepared when in fact they were not. So my mom was in agreement with me that it was, quote, appearing as if it was stealing and not right. So then I talked with my girlfriend. Again, she is not someone who is a good cook. She is not someone that prizes herself on baking or cooking or anything of the sort. She is the kind of person that purchases food already made. She eats out a lot. So again, I wanted to get her perspective, a completely opposite example of the situation and how in fact did she feel about this. And her response was, Anne, if I came to a potluck and I brought an item, whether it was a store-bought item or I made it myself, she's like, I would like to know that my crock pot or my dish that I brought it in, and however I prepared it and put it on the table, that other people had the respect to leave it there in the way that I put it on that table. And I said, again, confirmation, that's how I feel. It was not right to take my item and claim it as someone else's and just leave my food not heated up when the proper temperature should have been hot. So, in conclusion, in summary, I am speaking to my sisters here, perhaps brothers as well, but mostly sisters. Look, if you're going to go to a potluck and there's going to be a variety of people bringing various different things, it is respectable to honor and respect other people's dishes, the way that they prepared them, and to allow them to present it and keep it the way that they intended it to be. Number one. Number two, if you are someone who is purchasing something from the store and it's in a plastic container that's not microwave safe, then perhaps you should take more time in selecting an appropriate item to be brought to a potluck take more time in reading the fact that the plastic is not microwave safe, and perhaps you would even be more prepared to carry your own bowl, your own glass bowl, your own food heat warmer, your own crock pot, so that you can participate like all of the other people participated who were prepared and had their food warmers or their crock pots on the table. And lastly, my friend had asked me, Anne, what were the other items on the table? And did everybody else have crock pots or food warmers? And I again shared that the majority of the hot items were in crock pots or a rice cooker of some kind. And if there was food that was, on a food warmer, then someone had a glass or a Pyrex dish on top of a food warmer, such as I did. And the other part is I want to speak about nuts. Now, I eat nuts. I do not have allergies to nuts, so I like to put nuts in my food. And because I am respectful for other people and their potential nut allergies, when I make a dish such as tabbouleh, I put it on an index card and I list all of the ingredients that I put into that recipe. And I include and underline nuts so that if somebody has a nuts allergy, they can clearly see by looking at that index card, which is attached to my bowl, very clearly visible, that it has nuts in it. Now, as we all know, tabbouleh is a side dish, or it can be a main dish, and it is most definitely food. It's not a dessert, it's food. And so I appropriately put the tabbouleh on the table with my food. But someone decided to move my tabbouleh and move it over to the dessert table. Now, again, I don't understand why my bowl couldn't have sat on the table where I put it. There was plenty of space for it to sit there, but no, yet another person had to tamper with the placement of my food, and they moved it to a dessert table. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm piling up my dish at a potluck, I like to have all the food groups on one plate, and after I eat my main food, then I might go to the dessert table and have dessert. But if you put a food group, like a side dish of tabbouleh, on a dessert table, it's an awkward position for the food. It doesn't belong there. It should be on the table with the other main food. So again, I'm talking to the people that are on the hospitality committee or women that don't know anything about food. You might want to take a little bit of time and understand how like things are grouped together, and that's how you place them on a potluck table. And the other items that, such as dessert items, are grouped together, and food items are grouped together, and hot food is grouped together. So the bottom line is, again, I'm not a know-it-all. I don't have all the answers, but these are basic concepts that any woman who has learned how to cook or bake would have basic, minimal knowledge, meaning this is the correct temperature to make my food. It's either hot or it's cold. No one likes lukewarm coffee, and no one likes lukewarm food. They want it either hot or cold. So in order to maintain something that's hot or cold, that means that you have to take the proper food precautions, have the proper food travel wear and food heat warmers and crock pots and items of the sort, so that your food temperature will be the correct temperature, not just for the visibility of looking correct and proper in its context, but for food safety. Okay, I would not want somebody to have gotten sick for the portion where people had my food sitting out on the table for approximately a half an hour to an hour that wasn't cold and wasn't hot. And I'm just saying, as the manager and steward of my item that I brought, I did set it up properly, but somebody coveted my belongings. Someone stole my food prep materials so that they could attempt to accentuate their food and elevate their food above my food. And when I caught them in the act, they didn't like that they were caught, and they wanted to make it about how I was the jerk. Now, in this scenario, my goal is to elevate people, to encourage people, to wake up. If you didn't know these things, well, now you know. So now, the next step after you become observant and you become aware that coveting someone else's food prep materials and using them without permission is considered stealing. And if we're going to follow the 10 Commandments and we're not going to steal, then perhaps now, moving forward, you will ask someone if you can borrow something or use something before you just do it. And lastly, when we are dealing with different groups of people that come from different walks of life, and there may be some people that are more experienced and other people that are just learning these hospitality, food preparation, cooking issues, then it is wise to pair up with other people that know these simple hospitality basics so that you can emulate their behavior, their wisdom, and walk in a manner that is win-win for everyone. The main issue that I had in this scenario was that someone coveted my belongings. They stole my belongings without asking. And they then gave me an attitude problem that it's okay for them to steal because everybody does it this way in their church. And I'm sorry, people. When you start to say the opposite, that's what Revelation said, that people will call evil good and good evil. And I'm just declaring that that's not okay with me. And you need to wake up, you need to grow up, and you need to change your behavior so that you now know, if you heard this, don't come to a potluck again, take somebody else's dish pretending it's your own, trying to elevate your unpreparedness to take away from somebody else's preparedness, and then try to make that person out to be the bad guy because you yourself were not competent enough to know the basics of hot food is hot and cold food is cold, and you were unprepared because you didn't bring the correct utensils or bowls or heating elements. And hopefully, now that you know that, maybe you will go invest in the proper equipment. Crock pots can be bought at the Goodwill for $8. So we're not talking about a huge investment. A food warmer can be purchased at the Goodwill for, guess what? $8. So, given that, for $16, that person that was ill prepared And oh, a Pyrex dish is probably also $8 at a Goodwill. So 8 times 3 is 24. For $24, that person can make a minimal investment at a Goodwill to get a crock pot, a Pyrex glass dish, and a food warmer, electric food warmer. And guess what? The next time they go to a potluck, they could then be prepared and not be asking other virgins with their own oil to compensate for their unpreparedness. So I hope this helps somebody out there, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and perhaps you can apply some of this as you continue to celebrate with family and friends during the holiday season, where you may be trekking to and fro with your food prep materials at various gatherings. Have a good night, everybody.